Today is a big day.
Big one.
Yep. You know why? Because of this guy right here. Jaakko, you're our very first guest ever.
Yay!
And there's no one that I would rather have as our very first guest than you. Absolutely. So we're excited for today's... Yes, you're very welcome. We're excited for today's topic. We're going to be talking a little bit about like dogs' perspective on courses in general, how to read a course, all the sort of things that go with it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jaakko in just a second, but I will warn you ahead of time that often when we get together and we talk agility, we start with one thing and then it goes off.
In lots of different directions.
And that's the beauty of a podcast because it can be whatever we want it to be.
Exactly.
And we're just probably going to drop knowledge bombs over and over and over again. So I'm really excited for today. So our good friend Jaakko here is Jaakko Suoknuuti. He and his spouse Janita, help me with her last name again. Leinonen. Did I say it correctly?
Leinonen, yes.
Okay.
Good.
You said it much better. I was kind of close. They are from Finland, and I met Jaakko and Janita, I think, oh my God, almost 10 years ago in 2012, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, in Pennsylvania, USA, oddly enough. And I didn't know who the hell he was. And in about 10 minutes, I was like, oh, these are my people. And it was like, that was it. We were done for, right? We were just destined to be buddies. So I knew them for a couple years, and then I twisted Jaakko's arm to come over to Canada to teach, which allowed you to meet him and our whole crew. And then...
and Janita came that time too.
Janita did come. And I think she came for a couple times, and then we just got Jaakko back over a bunch of times. But anyways, it's been great. Jaakko and I are very good buddies. We talk... we actually talk pretty regularly. It's like one of those things where like you don't talk for very long or you don't talk for a long time and then you talk and it's like you just pick back up from where you left off, eh? We have very similar brains, and something that might come up in today's podcast is we spoke yesterday about today's podcast, and we were talking about the verbals and running contacts and sort of our opinions on that and what so on and so forth. And Jaakko just says, just call me. Let's just talk about it. And then I don't know, how long did we talk yesterday? For like an hour or something like that? I think so.
Yeah, probably even a little bit more.
I know.
Time flies.
Time does fly.
Good conversation.
Yeah, anyways, it was really good. So I don't know, maybe some of that stuff will come up again. But what's really cool is, from all of us being competitors, obviously, so we have that way of thinking, but also the commonality that we have of being coaches. So we see so many different things that come up with different dogs or different students, breeds, things like that. So a lot of the conversations that we had yesterday was actually realizing that the same kind of things that we notice here when we were talking about verbals and running dog walks and things like that, the exact same things are coming up in Finland with Jaakko students and all over the place. I just find that that's so interesting. So for today's topic, when we talk a little bit, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. One of the things that we kept coming back to yesterday when we were talking is that a lot of the issues that people were having with, verbals or contacts or whatever it was, all came down to people not being able to make great decisions because they didn't know enough about the course and how a course works, or they didn't know enough about how a dog thinks and what a dog needs. They think like, well,
what they need?
Yeah, I gave them that cue. Why didn't they do it? Well, it just doesn't work that way. So I just thought that today would be a really good opportunity to kind of talk about that. And if I think about where I personally learned a lot about like course design for one, and just like reading a course, that was, you obviously helped me with lots of things, but with that topic specifically, do you remember when I was visiting you guys and I was staying with you and you had to like do a presentation the next day on like course design, and you were sitting in your office and you were like working away and I kept coming in and bugging you because you weren't really doing anything. I don't know what you were doing. And I came in, I was like, what are you working on? You're like, oh, I have to do this thing on course design, blah, 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 blah. And like, you were kind of stuck. And then we started talking. And then I think you basically gave me like a 2-hour lesson on everything you knew about course design. Like, I don't know how I got so lucky. Janita was like, are you guys going to come to dinner? Like, what are you doing in here? Anyways, but that is when you started to talk to me about lead changes and how they worked. And this was such a long time ago. And I remember just having like mind-blowing moment after mind-blowing moment, because I was thinking back to all the times where like my dogs did something on course and like I didn't know why that happened. And then once I learned about lead courses, lead changes, I was like, oh my God, that now makes so much more sense. But you just have such a deep knowledge of how that stuff works. And it's something I find is very hard to teach somebody if it comes naturally to you, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I'm talking too much, so we're going to get going. But that's kind of what we wanted to talk a little bit about today. And I find the whole thing quite fascinating. So first things first, when we think about, I kind of mentioned this, but common problems on course, like things like wide turns, knocked bars, dogs not collecting, dogs taking off course, things like that. And then we have students that say like, why did that happen? Or I said in, or whatever they do because they're mad. When you have students that say that, I gave the cue, or, he's not listening to me or whatever, what's your like go-to response to them?
I think most of the times there's seems to be a difference between like the human's point of view and the dog's point of view.
Yeah.
And obviously, we being humans, we tend to think things always from our point of view. And I think that's probably the main problem, because quite often you can kind of track down the mistake, or whatever happened is that the handler were actually thinking of cueing dog something, and the dog just didn't understand, because the dog's point of view is different.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite often a matter of miscommunication between the handler and the dog.
Yep.
And always you find still that the handlers mean well. Mm-hmm. They try to obviously do their best, and they think they do exactly the right thing. But then just the dog reads it for some reason differently. And then I think that's when the trainer has to step in.
Yeah.
And open up a little bit the dog's point of view and try to fix the problem.
Does the handler's point of view ever come first, in your opinion?
I like this question. Well, I think it's interesting.
It is.
Like, would you ever make a decision based on what the handler needs?
Or their capability?
So? Yeah.
Yes. I would love to say no. I would love to say that the dogs are always right, and you have to do everything based on the dog's point of view. But it's obvious that because of the agility course as such, it's ever-changing environment. Mm-hmm. So you have to be places yourself, and sometimes it's almost impossible to reach those places if you only think about the dog's point of view and pick the side that actually would be better from the dog's point of view. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to kind of cut corners a little bit and take the other side. Even though I know it's not good for my dog, but still I sadly have to say that I need to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But even then, I feel that the most important thing is that I know that it's a choice I make. I know it's not good for my dog, so I can then still do some things that will help my dog. Because the worst case scenario might be that the dog might even injure themselves or whatever, and that's obviously too high of the risk. Mm-hmm. But like short answer would be that sometimes I understand that people have to do a compromise and make the better choice for them. But then, well, it's a difficult question.
Yeah, it is.
I understand they need to do that, but there should be a line that you shouldn't cross. Mm-hmm. When the risk is too high.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you think about average handler or whatever, I understand that it's very difficult to make the decision when what is too much.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't even, or most of the time they don't even know that they are choosing, like, from the dog's point of view, the more difficult option. They just don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a lack of information, and there is so much to know that I can appreciate that nobody knows and controls everything. It's just impossible.
Yeah. This reminds me of something else that you and I were talking about last night, which I thought was really cool. And that's when you have somebody who's maybe less experienced trying to make handling decisions, or actually not even less experienced. There's lots of really experienced people that have done agility for a long time that maybe don't know this. So, sometimes when we're doing a course and you get to like a certain section and like you just, without even thinking, just intuitively, what move you should do there, or even deeper, exactly when you should give that cue. I don't, when I walk a horse, I don't think about like, oh, I gotta look to see where all the lead changes is. Oh, I got to see blah, blah, blah. I don't
you just
think
naturally
just know it. And I don't have to, I don't have to rehearse when am I going to look, when am I going to say something. I just know how to do that. But that's very, very difficult for people. And what you and I were talking about, that is it's one thing for me to be able to do it, is another thing to teach somebody else how to do that. And actually, Jaakko, you talked about this yesterday when we talked about like when to give a verbal, at what point, like what do you tell a student when you should exactly do something. So there's a lot of things that you guys have developed with like OneMind Dogs and some of the methodologies and things like that, where you have some really great, I don't like calling anything rules because I don't really like rules, and I know you don't like rules either, but there's some guidelines that you have that I think would be really awesome to say on the podcast, that I think could be so helpful for people. Like even taking a second and talking about like the 3 C's, because I think for timing between obstacles, understanding how that works is so important from the dog's perspective, because I think a lot of people, they connect with the dog, they give a cue, but they never watch to see if the dog's committed, or people often miss one of the points, and then the whole thing falls apart. Do you want to talk for a sec a little bit about the 3 C's, what they are, and then like how you even came up with that? The thing that I am so amazed about with you and Jaakko, you and Janita, is like there's like a thing, and then they figure out a way to teach it that like simplifies it, and then you're like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. Like that makes so much sense. But anyways, can you talk a little bit about the whole CCC thing? Because I think it's like it literally could change things for people on course, I think.
So what we first found out is that the dog has basically a basic need to be in connection with the handler. We are often describe it as like a telephone line. Yeah. So either it's open or it's closed. So the connection means that the dog is prepared to take information from you. And maybe the easiest way to describe what it physically is that the direction that I'm watching. So if my head is turned slightly to my left, for example, like 45-degree angle from the straight line, then I know that my dog can see the side profile of my face, and then she knows to start looking for the next obstacle from my left. If I'm watching straight forward, then the dog is seeking the connection from me, and maybe when she's behind me, she starts to turn her head towards me. And that's not dog's work inside the ring. Her work, obviously, is to perform obstacles, right? Yep. So I feel that then the obstacles are the one that she should be actively trying to seek and find. Yep. And how she's able to do that is that I'm telling by the direction of my head, staying connected with her, which side of me to come or start looking for the next obstacle. So, and I feel that
one of the things I just want to ask about connection, because I find a lot of times when people will say, oh, you lost connection, or like what I think sometimes people think that it's that you should be looking at the dog. So I think it's really important for you, like you just explained it, but I think it's important to highlight that it's not, sometimes you do look at the dog, yes, but sometimes all you have to do is turn your head and just kind of know that the dog's there. That's like, it doesn't mean you should go from not looking at your dog to completely looking at your dog. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people misunderstand what connection means. It's not about eye contact all of the time. But I mean, you kind of explained that, but I think it's important to like spell it out for people, because that's a common thing that people think they should be doing. And then they run around staring at their dog the whole time.
I'm looking at my dog.
Yeah. And that's not helpful either. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's 100%. I agree. You are spot on right there. And we often get the same problem that people say that they try to look at their dog all the time. So basically, the times that I'm looking straight at my dog, there needs to be a couple of things. First of all, I need to have time to do that. In many cases, it's in places where I need to send my dog away from me, the completely other direction. Because what I want to see then is that I want to see the commitment. So I want to see that what the cue or the handling I was giving to my dog, she got it.
Right.
And she tells that by watching, for example, turning her head towards the next obstacle. And for me, it's very important to see that, because then I know that, okay, that's what she's going to do next. And I'm free then to move on the course. But obviously, in many cases, I think that the most important thing for the handler is to actually see where they are going. So one of the things that came up with this connection thing is that I realized that I feel that the agility handlers are mostly using their peripheral vision all the time. It feels that I very seldom look straight at anything.
Yeah.
I'm most of the
so
time
true.
looking at the ground.
Yeah.
But there is anything that I don't, my brain doesn't process what I'm seeing there, because there is something that I'm interested about.
Yes.
I'm just using the information that I get from my peripheral vision.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are courses that I do only that.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm only utilizing the information that comes from my peripheral vision instead of looking at anything almost during the whole course.
I know, it's like sometimes people say, well, what were you looking at? Or, what did you do out there? You're like, I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Because you actually didn't, with like this, you didn't look at anything.
Yeah.
And that's completely true. You kind of utilized all the time the information that came from the peripheral vision.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, and then I think one of the things then is that you have to learn. Actually, I think the skill that comes with this is that you have to learn to be able to run the agility course without looking where you are going.
Yes, that's really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. That, as funny as it might sound. So what I'm referring is that I'm not looking at anything, but I'm seeing a lot of shit.
Yes. So true.
Maybe it sounds weird, but that's kind of true, because I'm not looking at anything like this, but I'm seeing a lot
everything
of stuff
around
that
you.
I'm using.
One thing that just sort of sparked my thoughts as you were talking about connection is, so we use this phrase when we were coaching called transport obstacles or transport jumps. And I don't know if you use the same verbiage or not, but so, you know, basically, people say, handle every obstacle and, stay connected with your dog. And like I say, you don't have to handle every obstacle. You only have to handle some of the obstacles. There's some obstacles that are naturally in the dog's path, and you don't need to step in and be like, take this. Like some obstacles naturally create a flow from one point to the next, and we call those transport obstacles. They just sort of move your dog. You don't need to handle them. You can believe, you can trust that your dog will do that, so you can save the space in your brain for more important parts. What do you call those obstacles? Like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I know. I think there is whenever people get together, it comes down to how do you define a word.
Right.
So now, for example, I'm defining the word handling maybe a little bit differently. I completely agree that you do not have to do actively something like take a step or whatever to make the dog understand to take certain obstacles. But for me, if I'm moving straight forward and I'm staying connected with my dog, for me that falls into category of handling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I'm handling constantly, but I'm not actually doing anything else.
Yeah, I love that.
Like taking a step or push or whatever to.
Yeah, so it's probably not good to say you don't have to handle it. It's that you don't have to
exactly.
manage it
or actively handle it. Yeah, I like that definition. And it's important that we talk about these things because people are so literal. If you say to somebody, okay, you don't have to handle that, then the next time they run by it, the dog runs by the jump and they're like, well, you said not to handle it. And it's like, well, you should still
connect,
look there or whatever. So you're right. That's a really, really good point to define that even more definitively. I'm going to just use the same word.
Exactly. And the other thing is the same about the like watching the dog.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't mean that you look at the dog straight in the face all the time.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of maybe see it. Or I don't even though I feel completely connected with my dog, I don't necessarily even see my dog, not even from the corner of my eye. So let's take, for example, a blind cross. If I do a backside to a blind.
Yep.
For example, there is definitely can be even dog can proceed on the course maybe sometimes even 6 meters without me seeing the dog at all. I just know she's
6
there.
meters is like 18 feet for those North American people.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically what I saw is that she committed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm kind of giving a cue by doing the blind cross. But there might be like I'm running 18 feet without actually seeing my dog. But I know that the dog can see me turning my head.
Yeah.
So the connection part is completely fulfilled from the dog's point of view, even though I don't actually see my dog at all.
Yeah.
But still, I feel completely 100% connected.
Yeah, that's a good handling example. I think a lot of people hate that one, and I bet a lot of reasons why I used to hate that one.
Oh yeah,
because you're disconnected
for a moment
that people are also like Japanese. That move also gets people all fired up because you don't always feel perfectly in control because there's like a little point.
There's a moment
where you're like, it's a bit intuitive, but you're still maintaining connection the whole time. You just might not be looking. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The perfect handling example.
And if you think about other way around, I think most of the people, they kind of mess up with their blind crosses because they actually want to see. They turn their head too much and then they can't see where they are running. So they tend to stop, or their own paths start to swerve away from the obstacle, or something like that will happen.
You can't run as fast when you're turned around the other way.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what you are talking about intuitive handling, I feel that it's also, I don't know, it's a little hard to explain, but I feel that I can predict based on the training and experience that I have done it so many times that I feel fully in control because I have done it like, I don't know, 10,000 times and my dog never has missed the obstacle.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel more like it's not about me controlling. I feel that I'm completely in control. But what I'm referring it nowadays is that I kind of have a crystal ball that you can predict future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an analogy what I use, that I can see very clear picture in my crystal ball that when I do this, I already know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And now the emphasis is on the word I know.
Yes.
It's not a guess. It's more like at least educated guess.
Yes.
Or something like that. And that should be enough because if you are not able to do that, I feel that many times you are just doomed eternally to be late.
Yeah, totally. That's so true. I think that's a good way of thinking of it. I think that it's definitely harder with younger dogs when you're like trying to figure out
that
like
teamwork.
Yeah. But when you have a dog that you've been practiced with, like you've said, and you do have a strong sense of their training, they're trained to do their job. You know, when you ask for this thing, you're going to get that.
How they commit to obstacles.
Yep. And then on top of that, having a truer understanding of how they actually take the obstacles, like if they're jumping an extension, where do they take off? Therefore, what's your timing with that? If you ask them for collection, where do they take off? Therefore, what's your timing for that? If you know all of those things, remember you showed me a video once, and I can't remember. I think it was with you in one of your dogs. I don't remember which one it was, where you taped the takeoff spot and the landing spot with physical tape on the ground, and then you ran your dog through it, and then we watched it back in slow motion, and your dog literally took off and landed on the pieces of tape. And I'm not talking like 2 obstacles. It was like a full sequence, and it was like boom, 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 boom. I bet you there's very few people that I think I might have tried it. I was pretty good at it, but I haven't done it in years and years and years and years. I don't have no idea whether I'd be able to do it with B or not. Mm-hmm. That was like back with like my older dogs, but we should set that up and try it again. But I think though that furthermore to what you were saying, when you have a sense that you know those things, it takes so much pressure off running the dog. If you have all of these things in place, think of how much easier it would be to get through course after course after course after course clean. Not that I'm saying it's possible to do course after course after course clean perfectly all the time. Shit happens. However, your success rate goes way up when you have a deeper knowledge of some of these things, for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm also thinking that very often you hear the phrase that people say that you need to be brave when you do your handling choices. You need to, somehow handling bravely and like, for example, I do something from the distance and people say that, whoa, you did
it was
that,
risky.
Like, how did you have the nerve to do that from such a long distance?
Yeah.
That was really brave. But I feel that you need to be brave if you do something that you don't know the outcome.
Well, to get better.
Yeah, if you don't know the outcome, then you have to be brave in order to do that.
Right.
But because I know already, I can predict the outcome because I have done it before. I know my dog.
Yeah.
I know all the elements that go with it. So I actually don't have to be brave. It's just another day in the office.
Yeah, and you're being smart, not brave.
Yeah, exactly. And that gives you that sense of self-confidence. But it's based on training. It's not something that somebody comes from somewhere and says that, no, you need to trust your dog. The trust is built.
Yeah.
It doesn't come up from the air. Somebody is, waving a magic wand and now you trust your dog.
Yeah.
It doesn't just work that way.
No.
The trust is built. And like you said, if I have a young dog, I have nothing to trust on because I really don't know, or I actually know that she doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
So I have to, but then I think that what should start in the first training with the puppy, I feel that nowadays I think it as I start to draw that picture that will later on to show up in that crystal ball. You understand?
Yep.
It's not there. It's something that I'm kind of building training by training, but all the trainings are kind of going towards that one goal that I want to learn how this dog is working. And I know what skills she needs to possess when she gets older for me to utilize and be able to handle her, myself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This comes back to, we did a podcast a few episodes ago on developing young dogs. And one of the things that we were talking about is a lot of the time, rather than doing agility per se with our young dogs, we're just trying to figure out the dog. Like, Are they more prone to like being flanky? Are they more prone to like chasing, and we're going to have to deal with that? Are they naturally like more handler focused, and you're going to have to work on getting them to be focused,
more independent,
like, whatever it might be? Like, what is the dog? Are they sensitive? Do they need you to build them up a little bit? Are they super high minded and you need to, tone them down a little bit? So it's all about that. And I think that that's sort of what you're talking about is you're developing the process, you're learning the dog, so that as you go forward and you start developing more handling skills, more agility, you know how to make the decision better for that dog because you have a more thorough understanding of kind of like what you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Definitely like that. And the other thing is that I think everybody should think a little bit about their goals, because I think like when you're an experienced handler, you have kind of clear picture already in your head that, okay, where all this is going.
Yeah.
Your good sides and shortcomings as a handler. So you kind of know what skills your dog maybe needs to have so that you can be successful as a pair. And when you have a very clear picture of that, so you know where you are going, then you start kind of since the day one, you start to figure out, okay, what I'm going to teach her in the long term that when she's ready to compete or whatever, we get the best out of us as a pair. So, and obviously then you need to know the dog. You have to have more or less clear goals, because I also feel that the higher you're aiming, the more skills obviously your dog needs to possess.
Yep.
And then you have to also try to figure out that you have the resources to build that type of the dog, like as a handler, or achieve your goals as a handler, as a dog trainer. And one other very important thing is that I also think and thoroughly believe that you also should be happy going towards that goal. Because that's something I sometimes...
I was like, what is he going to say here? Yep, that's so true, yes.
Yeah, because sometimes I nowadays see that, for example, the running contact, because it's hot.
It is hard.
Everybody wants to have it. And,
it's hot, he said.
It's this
it is hot.
Flashy newish thing and whatever. And
it's hot and hard.
And then often I see in my training very unhappy people.
Because the dogs aren't getting the contact?
Yeah, because they put a lot of effort and time into that, and then they don't get, for some reason, they just don't get it to work, and they get really, really frustrated about it. And we have had a couple of discussions with our students that who decided that these dogs or you as a pair need running contacts? And it quite often gets them really silent. It's not their goal when they start to think of it. Actually, what they want to do is they want to have fun. They want to do clean runs. They want to be happy doing agility. And then when you kind of ask a little bit, they all of a sudden they realize that the running contacts aren't making them happy. It's giving them way too much pressure. But then they need somebody from the outside to kind of give them a permission that you do not have to have running contacts. And when they kind of get that guidance from outside, it's like a huge relief.
Pressure's off.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And then they kind of find the happiness back again. And now I'm not saying that it's for everybody. It can be that the running contact is the thing. That's why they love doing agility. They love training it. So it can also be other way around. But it's about more like personal goals. You should set them yourself. It should never be kind of
defined by somebody else.
That you picked up from somewhere and you don't even know where it came from. But because everybody else is having, I need to have, or whatever might be the reason.
Yeah.
And that's quite often lost sometimes, I see.
I agree. I think, do you think that we should start like running Dog Walk Anonymous, where people can we can give therapy lessons to those people who are doing running contacts?
Oh,
because like some people just have meltdowns about it because it is really hard, but they're, anyways, we could go down a whole bandwagon on this. That's another topic for another day. But I do think that the point though was about the happiness thing. I think that that's really, really important because part of your teamwork and part of the whole thing is like if you're spending all of your time just frustrated, whether take aside running contacts, just in
it could
general,
be anything.
It could be anything. It's not really going to move you forward to where you're going.
That's where you need your coach to be able to say,
call you out on it.
Yeah. This is what needs to happen.
One of the other things, I'm going to just change directions here a little bit. There's another point.
No, not yet.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We are still missing 2 C's.
Oh, that was only connection. You're right.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not so fast, Missy.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so we talked about connection. There's 2 more C's that we need to talk about. Sorry, Jaakko.
Yeah, so obviously the next one would be the commitment.
Yeah.
Part that for me the commitment means the exact moment the dog knows which obstacle she should perform. And that can be sometimes really, really early. And for the handler, it would be very important to kind of understand when the dog has committed.
Mm-hmm.
Because after the dog has committed the obstacle, basically then the dog, for me, kind of, I think it as like the dog has promised me to do that obstacle. So then I think it kind of, the responsibility of staying committed to that obstacle, it kind of transfers.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, are you still in the belief that if your dog commits to something, that they should stay committed to something instead of like dropping it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely 100%.
Yeah.
Only thing if I might have something like like an emergency brake type of command, like come here.
Oh shit! I didn't mean to send you there.
Yeah, which kind of means that okay, drop whatever you are doing and come there.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I feel that I'm a firm believer of really, really strong obstacle commitments for the dog, and that's I feel that we spend quite a lot of time and training to
teach them that.
Teach our dogs to do that.
Yeah. This came up in our conversation yesterday when we were talking about verbals, but I think we were also talking about commitment. And when somebody understands or has trained, like our dogs, for example, our dogs have very early commitment because of our training, which means, though, that we have a smaller window than maybe a dog that has a later commitment to tell them what they should be doing.
Or to get to the critical point.
Yeah. Because what Jaakko and I were talking about, like threadles yesterday, and how a lot of people allow so if you have like a 2-jump threadle where the dog's going over the jump and then threadling to the inside, between, like a lot of people will let the dog take the first jump and then they give the threadle cue. And when the dog takes the jump as a 180, they're like, I said in. And it's like, because they don't, it was just, I know we used that example yesterday, Jaakko, but it's such a clear one to really like for people to envision, because, when the dog commits to the first jump, they're committing to the jump as if they're going, to take it as a 180 because people aren't thinking about what the dog needs. It circles back to like our dog's perspective thing. But I think the threadle situation aside, that also goes for like getting a tight turn or doing a discrimination or whatever it might be. When your dog has early commitment, the benefits are, well, you don't have to like stay there as long. You can cue and you can get out of there and the dog knows their job. But the harder part for people where you have to have some skill behind you and some, good timing is you now do have a bit of a smaller window where you have to say, okay, I see that you see it. Now this is how you need to take it. Okay, you know my job now. I need to go. But when you run a fast dog, that small window of things can be very stressful for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And then if it's like a discrimination or something, and if the dog has already committed basically the wrong obstacle, then I feel it's much harder for them to kind of change their mind anymore, even though they understand discrimination as such, even really well, but they have already committed. I feel that my dogs they don't change that easily, even though the discrimination it's okay, it's not bad, but I have to give the cues what to take like really early before they have committed anything. Then I have to say it already really early. And
this is where taping comes in handy for people,
so people can see when totally. Hey, I have a question for you. Do you think that typically dogs who have early commitment are dogs that are faster in agility? Do you think that, don't think about the training side of things, but do you think that dogs who commit to obstacles early are typically faster in speed?
Well, yes, in general, yes. I feel that maybe the dogs that have a little bit later commitment, they normally maybe require a handler that is moving a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But then if you have a good handler that can really run well, then there even not might be any difference in times. Mm-hmm. But I feel that type of dogs, they maybe need a little bit more active handling. Yeah. And the other thing though is that, which definitely is the fact that the dogs that have a little bit later commitment, from my point of view, I feel that they are much easier to handle. For
the handler.
If you think about making clean runs,
they're not
if you think about making clean runs, then it's not much less risk for off courses and stuff like that. So there are also perks to later commitment. So again, it's not like it's always like this or always like that. There are always pros and cons, and it depends, the handler dog pair. That's what dictates what is best for everybody.
Yeah, the reason why I asked you that question is I find sometimes when I have students that are frustrated that their dogs are like going off course and finding this line or, taking this tunnel instead of doing the discriminant tunnel, and they're getting sort of irritated. I look at the dog and think like, shit, this dog is fast. Like this dog sees its job, sees its line, and like is going. And I think I see it because I can see when the dog's committed. I can see that the dog's doing what they're supposed to do. It's just the person's job wasn't done correctly. But I think what I often will say to people is that you need to be better at giving your cue, but you have to appreciate the fact that the reason why your dog is making this error is the same reason why they're so fast. And that's what you want. So you got to figure out how to drive your Ferrari, because we don't want to turn it into a slower car, because that's what happens. People turn their dogs slower because they start to say, and this was sort of the next point I was going to make, but it just comes perfectly with commitment, is the whole like natural versus like I need to tell you to do this type of thing, because some people get very frustrated when the dogs are on a natural line. We see it as like, what a dog, right? What a dog. Perfect. That's what they should be doing. But when then people start being upset, he's having some wine.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm. We didn't clink today. There we go. Clink.
Clink, clink, clink.
Clunk, clink, clink, clunk. When, what the hell was I saying? Oh, when people need to appreciate that you don't want to turn that off of the dog. You don't want to suddenly make a dog think that they shouldn't find a line and take it hellbent for election. Like that's how they should run. And then they need to also be listening to what you're saying. But I think sometimes people get frustrated with that and then they overcompensate. Well, now the dog doesn't run with that full confidence anymore, because they think, well, you're gonna change me and you're gonna change me and I don't really know. This is what I think I'm supposed to do, but now you're switching things up. So but I think that sometimes can like mess up dogs' commitment. You can have a dog that has the potential to have really great commitment, and then you can botch it up. Or the other thing that happens is you can have a dog that has not very good commitment, and you can improve that a lot with training and so on and so forth. So I think what's good to note for people who are listening is that your dog's commitment that they have now isn't necessarily what they can have forever. Like you have the opportunity to influence that based on being a better handler and being a better dog trainer. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. my advice normally for those people who dog takes off course and they start to be frustrated about that, I always give the same advice: reward your dog.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's kind of the most common thing I always say to them. Then they are like, "But she did the wrong obstacle." Then
you're like,
you
nope. Yeah, but you did the wrong thing. Therefore, your dog did the right thing. Yeah, so true.
Definitely. And then the next thing I tell them, that which I feel it has helped many people, is that I have drawn some kind of diagram about it. You can kind of think that if there is like in general, you think about how difficult it is to handle a dog in agility, and then you think about the dog's speed, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens is that every second the dog gets faster, the imagined difficulty of the handling rises. Mm-hmm. And that's just how it is. And people need to give themselves time, because if you want that fast dog that is in this category here, when they get fast enough and they have early commitments, which equals, for me, early commitment is often equals speed. Mm-hmm. It equals confidence dog,
independence,
and all kind of this type of stuff. They just make the decision so early, and like you already referred in some other thing, is that the time window that it gives to us as handlers, it gets really narrow.
Short. Mm-hmm.
And then it just the fact is that handling the faster the dog gets, the earlier it makes commitments. It is more difficult to handle.
Yeah.
So,
but it's a hell of a lot more fun.
My advice would be that don't get frustrated. It will come, but it will take more practice and more time. But you have to be merciful to yourself as a handler, mm-hmm. that you give yourself more time to adjust with that dog. Mm-hmm. Because most of them never had the dog like that, for example. They might come, the background of having a much slower dog and whatever.
That's a hard transition, though.
Yeah, definitely. And when they understand that it's okay, it is more difficult task to handle faster dog, then they can kind of maybe give them themselves more time to adjust.
Yeah, mm-hmm. For sure.
Without needing to take the dog's speed away, mm-hmm. Make the dog slower, which doesn't make any sense.
No.
I don't know if this sort of falls under commitment or not, but what are your thoughts on, and we touched a bit on this yesterday, but what are your thoughts on things like, trying to figure out how to set the question up. So yesterday you and I were talking about how on course, how there's some obstacles that like people view as being off course, for example, but we know it's not really a problem. Like a tunnel, for example, where the dog would have to like lead change away in order to get to it, or situations where the dog might like flick away. And so people don't want to handle because they're worried about that happening. But like naturally the dog shouldn't do that. What are your thoughts on that topic? And then also, because I know from training with you before, you're trying to make sure that the dogs aren't anticipating too much on some of those things, so that you don't have to like run around like worrying that your dogs are going to be like really like flinchy and like turn away. But I think it's important for people to have a more thorough understanding of what actually. This circles back to what we said before, like about understanding a course. Like if you look at a course, you need to be able to know that that tunnel's not going to be a problem, or that jump's not going to be a problem, because the dog shouldn't even naturally be looking there. But then people don't necessarily know that, and then they overhandle everything, and then they end up making a mistake because they're trying to juggle 500 balls when they really could have just run past it. I don't really know what my question is, but that's sort of the topic, because that happens a lot with.
It sounds like it's a lack of understanding, though.
Yeah. Well, how would you describe to somebody about like how to? I guess you have to teach them about lead changes in order for them to really understand that. I think that's a big component of being able to foresee that being an issue on course or not. Would you say, or would you describe it another way?
Well, I think maybe the best way to kind of people to study that might be like what we are referring as either or training. Do you use the same phrase?
Yeah, we say this or that training.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but same idea, because kind of what you see in dog training often is that when people do something, they try to get the dog to do something, and then the dog does it like 3 times wrong first, and they don't change much, and they just try to make the dog to understand, and then the dog does the correct thing, and then they are happy. But they don't prove that like, because then the dog, if you let it just be there, the dog kind of keeps on doing that because now she knows what you expected her. Mm-hmm. But the dog might still not understand the handling behind it. It's just offering you a behavior because you were happy. Yeah. But she doesn't really follow your lead at all.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And the only way I know that, I don't know how to explain. I just feel it. I feel it that the dog is disconnected to me. I don't know how to explain it.
But how do you teach that to someone too? Like that natural.
That is an interesting thing, because you're right. Because sometimes, like when we're training our own dog, I've had senses where like she's just doing that because she thinks that's what I want her to do, but I'm not actually telling her to do that. She just is like, "Ooh, you were excited because I did this before, so I'm going to do it again." Like they have to. Yeah, I do know what you mean. It is hard to understand, but that's why the this or that or the either or training is so important, because you can start to see, is my dog actually cueing off me, or is she just replicating something that she thinks is right? Yeah. Yeah, but
exactly.
That's why it's so important.
That would be my advice to how to do, kind of see if the dog is doing the right thing for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. I think that's the point. And then you kind of maybe also get rid of, you understand, and the dog understands also better that she learns to read the handler. Okay, if she's doing that, I need to do this. If she's doing something different, I'm expected to do something different too. So that, I think that would be how you prevent those type of things happening, that dog is offering you too easily the behavior, not really waiting for you to cue it, actually.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the other thing is that if you ever have the feeling in the course that something is happening like too easily, it probably is.
That's a good point. You just happened to happen by accident, but the correct way. Lucky.
Yeah, exactly.
I see that happen a lot. It actually just makes me giggle. I see that ever so often in our lower levels in agility, and we laugh at this sometimes because we know damn well the students never trained their dog to do,
and the dog just naturally
figures it out, and like they look like they've just come back from the World Championships, and you think, man, what a dog. What a dog. Dog's like, I think you mean this, and it just happens to like all work out. I just love that. It just gives you such an appreciation for how damn smart dogs are. Like they can just sort of figure it out a little bit, but then you don't want the handler to get false hope to think that like they have that down, because they might not be able to do it again.
But that's one of the things that why just being consistent, it's so important, because feel that for example, because I try to do things really consistently in my handling, and maybe there is kind of two sides to that. The other one is that when I do everything the same way every time, or as much same way as possible, I kind of drive that skill to an automated level, so I don't have to think how to do it in the course, because I don't have time to do that. So it kind of goes to my spine or subconscious mind or whatever, and it just comes out without me thinking of it. And then what I learned now, for example, with my youngest dog, is that I felt that, like you said, they are so smart. So based on solely on that thing that you work with them with a consistent manner, they pick up, a lot of stuff just based on that.
Yeah.
So they are constantly learning, even though you don't kind of even try to teach them anything.
Yes.
Like, in that sense that, okay, this is training and now there's your reward and there's obstacle and now I give you a command, but they all the time pick up things. So just being consistent, I feel that the dogs learn really much the basic handling and how to follow your handling and follow your lead in the course already, just without needing to do a specific training for that.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And this is going to be a sensitive topic for Jamie, but one of the things that has come up recently is, so she has a young dog that's like little over 8 months, and she has been doing a lot of individual like skill training and things like that. He's a puppy, and she's obviously a very skilled and experienced handler. And the other day, just for shits and giggles, she decided to put a small basic level sequence together. Jumps were low. It was like, I don't know, eight obstacles, just jumps and tunnels, and nailed it on the first try. So amazing. And a couple people were like, well, how could you possibly be able to do this sequence? He's only 8 months old, blah, 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 blah.
And I literally just put it together.
I know. And then she's like, oh my God. And because what happens is when you have an experienced person who's consistent with the understanding, that person literally only has to do a couple repetitions of something and it just falls together. It's very, very different than an inexperienced person, an untrained dog, that type of thing. It's just, I think people need to understand that the more consistent you are and the more thorough the training is, you don't have to do as much repetitions in training. And that's something that we're all mindful of when we're training our dogs, for sure. I mean, that's something that, you guys, we've had endless conversations about that, about, not having to do 100 million repetitions in order to achieve something, but I just think that's just, when he was saying that, it just reminded me of that, because it's so true. If you are consistent and you have a more thorough understanding of what your goals are, like literally all the things that we've been talking about, it does start to come together so much quicker, and it's not really that hard. Now, when you bring like competition into the mix and you bring pressure and you bring all of these other things, like obviously that's harder, but just running a little 8 obstacle sequence with like a couple crosses and a backside, like you could do that in your sleep. You've done that hundreds of times. So it's just, I just think that's an important point to bring up. That's where that consistency comes in play, because you don't have to do it so many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of all have, like, in the past, I have like heard too many times, when people see that you come with a relatively young dog and the dog is basically competition ready, what the initial thought, like automatically, is that, okay, that dog has been trained so much, because they think maybe from their perspective that how much training would they think that it needs to get the dog to that point. But I assure you that it couldn't be more far away from the truth.
Yeah.
So it's possible to do so little training that whenever we say that we train like once a week or whatever, and then you go to competition, nobody believes it, basically.
It's quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely very, very important.
Should we move on to the last C?
The last C.
Oh, you remember.
I don't make the same mistake twice, Jaakko.
Yeah, so the last C would be cue, and all the cues need to be given for the dog as early as possible, as soon as possible, as early.
It both makes sense. Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes Jaakko teaches us about English. He actually did that before we hit record. Yeah. I forget what it was, but we were saying something wrong and you corrected us.
I was thinking that it doesn't mean, if I say early, it doesn't mean that I have to give it like 5:30 a.m. the information.
That's far too early for us.
Yeah. So as early as possible, preferably immediately after commitment. So, and the cues can be whatever, all the handling that tells the dog what to do So what type of line to take? Should you need to collect or extend or turn left, right, continue straight, whatever, or maybe the next obstacle command, whatever cue you're giving the dog so that the dog understands what to do after this obstacle I have now committed.
Yep. Yeah. And then as far as the cue goes, like this, what we're talking about with the 3 C's, connect, commit, cue, it really doesn't matter what handling methods you follow or what your cues are, or like, because everybody does slightly different. But this formula that we're talking about today,
it's clear on what you need to do.
It's about what the dog needs. Has nothing to do with what your handling is. Every dog needs the information in this way in order to be able to listen to you and to be on course. So when we talk about cue, I don't want people to get stuck on like a methodology. It doesn't matter. It's what the dog needs. What I also find is really funny is that I'll like, you say like a German or whatever, and then people are like, oh, well, I do a backside blind. And I'm like, what we're doing is the same thing. Like, because they will do a German in front of me, but they call the backside blind, and I have to explain like the whole difference. But what I think is just so funny is people all think like they have their own thing, but when you watch them,
it's the same.
It's the same thing. You just called it a different name. Except what I have found is that there are certain nuances that define some of the different moves that often look really same. That would actually be another good podcast. We were going to talk about that as why it's so helpful to have names for everything.
And common language.
You must get asked that. Maybe not so much anymore because I think people are more used to it. But like before, when OneMind Dogs came out and you had like your list of like 25 techniques, people were like, I can't possibly remember all that. Like, why do you need all these names for everything? And then when you explain it and sort of use it, you start to realize, wow, it's a heck of a lot easier to communicate and have a more thorough understanding of what your cues should be when you know exactly what you should do for each thing. Where should your head be looking? You know, where should you be pointing? If all of those things have a
meaning
and a consistency, then your cues become a lot more consistent. But we always laugh about that because people get so hung up on the names of things. We just spout them off because it's like speaking a different language. But you know, it's so helpful.
It is helpful.
It is so helpful.
Yeah, and in the beginning, I when we started that, I don't care what they are called. That, like I said, it's not important.
Yeah.
The important part is that there are better and worse ways of doing stuff, and it's good for learning and it's good for communicating that it's kind of specific name.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't matter what things are called. It's all the same. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just benefits. Again, it benefits the handler, and whatever benefits the handler benefits the dogs. Mm-hmm. And I think we all agree on that we are interested about, you know,
benefiting the dog.
And benefiting the dogs.
Yep, handling
I
for the
think that
dog
should always be the main focus, whatever we do.
Yeah. So now that we've covered all of the 3 C's, we kind of did it in a long way. We can probably wrap up now, but we actually we had a few more things on our sheet. Jaakko, you said you had a few more things that you wanted to cover as well, right? That we didn't get to. So you know what I think that means? I think we're going to go to part two. Oh, yeah.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this podcast, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. We have a whole bunch of really awesome things coming up. If you are listening to us on any of the podcast platforms, you can watch this episode on McCann Dogs Agility YouTube channel. Or if you are watching us on YouTube, you can listen to us as a podcast. But we're going to jump off and we are going to continue this conversation in part 2. So thanks a lot for listening, guys. Thanks for listening to our McCann Dogs Agility podcast. If you'd like to learn more about us, check out the links in the show notes below. On that note, happy training.